What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I will be reviewing Andor Season 1. This is pretty exciting for me because this will be my first TV show that I review, and that's fun. So, with TV shows, I do intend on doing TV shows on this channel that just will never be a main focus because they're quite a bit longer than movies, but I do watch TV shows from time to time, and I do finish them all the way through, and then I want to talk about them. So that's what I get to do today. Now, when it comes to TV shows, I like to review them season by season and never episode by episode. Now, that's not to say that I won't do it episode by episode in the future, but for right now, I'm going to keep it to season by season because I prefer it that way. A lot of times, what's considered a bad episode in the middle of a season is actually revealed to be a rather important episode by the end of the season, and vice versa. That can happen. So I like that. On top of all that, I accept that there will be bland filler episodes from time to time in my TV shows, and so I don't mind it as much. And I want to review a season as a whole and not at an individual episode level, at least for right now. So that's what we're going to do with Andor. Now, before I get to the character and plot of this TV show, I want to first talk about its tone, because it's very different from any other Star Wars show that we've gotten, and really any other Star Wars property that we've gotten. This show is intense. It's dark, it's gritty, it's grounded, and many people love that. I like it, but I don't love it. Let me explain. So, in 2023, two other Star Wars shows came out, namely Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But both of them failed in very similar ways because they both had very simple characters and not really well thought out plots or well written stories in that sense. It was kind of almost caveman-esque. Obi-Wan good, Darth Vader bad, they fight. It wasn't very deep, and I didn't like that as much. That's my quick review of them, by the way. I will do full reviews of them later, but for now, we're just going to stick with that. Point is, I wanted more complex characters. I wanted better written stories, and so Andor seems like the natural conclusion to that. And it is. It has really well-written characters. It has a well-thought-out plot. It works really well, except that it almost works too well. It's a little too dark, a little too gritty as a natural byproduct of these things for me to fully enjoy it. There were a number of scenes that made my skin crawl and/or just, low-key disturbed me to a degree. And I'm okay with that. Nothing ever crossed the line for me, but it was dark and gritty enough that I would not feel comfortable showing Andor to my kids. And as someone who comes to Star Wars because it's a family-friendly action-adventure series, this show isn't necessarily the thing that I'm looking for. What am I looking for, you might ask? Well, on the spectrum from Obi-Wan Kenobi to Andor, I want a show that lines up a little bit more in the middle. More complex characters, but a little bit more happy-go-lucky feeling, a little less, dark and grittiness. So this image up above is kind of where I show there's like a little sweet spot I'm looking for. The Mandalorian is more in the middle, but it still leans towards that more simplistic style of storytelling, and that's fine. I like Mandalorian for what it is, but I do wish it had a little bit more complex characterizations and a little bit better storytelling. But that's enough about tone. Let's talk about the characters of Andor. And before I talk about any one specific character, I just want to talk about the amount of characters that are in this show. I remember in the promos leading up to this, they talked about how there were going to be over 100 characters with speaking lines, and I thought, wow, how are they going to do that? But then they did it, and it worked so well. What I love about it is that Andor creates this rich world with real lived-in characters that have their own motivations, their own goals, their own desires. They each have their own little thing, and it's super fascinating to see. But despite having all these characters, the show manages to maintain its focus on Andor, and I love that. In those other three live-action Star Wars shows, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan, there were all these episodes that were focused on other characters outside of our main character. But this one is able to maintain its focus really, really well. What I like about this is because all of the characters are directly impacted by the actions of our main character, Cassian Andor. For instance, his homeworld of Ferrix are dealing with the Imperials and the added heat and problems that came because of Andor's shenanigans. The Imperials, the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau, are focused on finding Andor because he is their link to the larger rebellion at hand. Luthen, a member of the larger rebellion, is focused on finding Andor because he might reveal who Luthen is to the ISB. It's all interconnected really, really well, and virtually every character in this show has some connection or reason to care about who Andor is and what he's doing. And that's what makes this show still aptly titled Andor and not some other thing. And speaking of Andor, let's talk about our main character, Cassian. I really liked how they treated him in this show. He's morally gray. He starts out as a loner. By the end of the season, he's willing to help the rebellion. And I love seeing the experiences that took him to get there. I particularly enjoyed how the rebel mission didn't seal the deal for him. Even though he was on a successful rebel mission, that didn't make him want to join the rebellion. Instead, that helped, but it also required him to get thrown in prison on trumped up charges that were meaningless, and then be placed in this terrible prison where even when people fulfilled their duty, fulfilled all the shifts, they still got put right back into prison. No one was getting out, and he realized, I have to escape, and wow, the Empire is truly a deplorable place. It is not a good government. And so then he breaks out of the prison. He decides, I need to get out of here. I need to set my life in order. First, I'm going to save my friends, and then I'm going to join the rebellion. And it's great. I love it. Next, let's talk about Luthen. And I love Luthen. I think he's so cool. Firstly, the double life that he leads of the gray-haired wig and the friendly shopkeeper is fantastic compared to the hard and gritty rebel that he is. It's so cool. I love that he's a hands-on rebel. He's not just a leader. He will go out into the field and try and recruit people like he did with Andor. But he also stays back a little bit. He's the organizer. He knows how important he is. He knows if he falls, the rebellion falls. And I love this scene that I'm showing up on screen where he admits to the fact that he's losing his humanity. He has to make really tough, terrible choices in order for the rebellion to succeed, in order for the Empire to be defeated. And that line when he says, I have to use the tools of my enemy to destroy my enemy, is just fantastically sad and tragic, and I love that. And I like that this is not the end for Luthen. At the end of the season, he hears the little speech by Marva and realizes, at least I think he realizes there might be a better way to being a rebel. And he might be on his own dynamic path to change, and that'd be great. But I still love him for who he is, and I love the added depth he adds to the rebellion and the Star Wars mythos as a whole. Last main character I want to talk about is Mon Mothma, and I actually don't like what they did with Mon Mothma for a couple of reasons. Number one, she's not actually focused on Andor. Her story always felt very secondary to everything else that was happening in the show, which I thought was kind of odd. The other thing I don't like about her is that they made her kind of dark and have this dark side to her, which I don't like because I like Mon Mothma being that sense of pure rebellion goodness who wants to fight the good fight to stop tyranny, and not this dark person that is, like the show shows, is forced to sell out her family in order so that the rebellion can have the funds and the money that it needs. And I don't like that as much. It makes it so that in Rebels, when she condemns Saw Gerrera for being an extremist, it just feels so much more hollow now because we know the terrible things she had to do in order to help the rebellion herself. So it's like, really? Are you really standing on such high ground? But maybe next season we'll see her change. Maybe we'll see her say, no, I'm not willing to do this anymore. I have to be who I am. I don't know, but I didn't like her in this season. As for the other characters in this show, I really liked them. Vel, Mon Mothma's cousin, was a really interesting rebel, and I liked seeing her. Deidre, the ISB agent who's looking for the rebels and doesn't have much support from her superiors, but does have a little bit of support, was very realistic. I liked how it wasn't all one way or the other. It wasn't like her superiors hated her, but it wasn't like her superiors loved everything she was doing. You know, it was very more complex than that. as is the theme of this episode, complex characters. And then the last character that I want to talk about, Cyril. He was super awesome. I love how he failed. He failed to capture Andor. He failed to be a good officer. And then he gets dropped by the Empire. And instead of that spurring him to become a rebel himself, instead he's like, no, I did mess up. I did fail. I failed my Empire, and I want to try and do everything I can to fix that. And I like that kind of that self-guilt that he puts on himself. It's very interesting and very well done. And I like where his character is at by the end of the first season, with him joining Deirdre and them going to take down the rebellion in the next season. It will be really exciting to see. Next is the plot. And I like the plot of this show a lot, especially how character-driven it is. Of course, there will always be some things where the plot needed this to happen, so it happened, but for the most part, it is character-driven, and I really, really enjoy that. What I also love is that each of the characters initially fails in the goals they set out to do. With Andor, it's most obvious. He wants to leave Ferrix, but in so doing, he fails to leave it without being noticed. Ferrix is in a worse state than when he first was there, and it caused problems. On the rebel mission to steal all the money, he succeeds, but not without losing half of the rebel agents that he came and started the thing with. In the prison escape, he succeeds, but not all the prisoners get out, and it kind of has some problems. And so I like how it took him, and really the entire show, all of the characters, they have to struggle. They have to go through some trials, some problems before they get success. And even when they find success, they also find failure. And that's very true to life and very good. But the plot itself, I also really enjoyed. I liked how, at the beginning, Andor accidentally kills these two uniformed officers, and it causes problems. This isn't something he can just walk away from. That puts some heat on him, and he has to get off Ferrix. Then he finds a solution. He joins himself with the rebellion, but it's not perfect. He has to do this very dangerous heist, and that was a really exciting plot to see the rebels planning and making an idea of how to steal the money, and it actually makes sense. It's not just, oh yeah, we got away because our ship is faster than their ship. It's like, no, we used a meteor swarm that happens every couple of years to cover our escape, which worked fantastically. But even that success, half the rebels died in so doing. Also, something that I really liked about that scene was when they enter the base and they hold the Imperial family at gunpoint. Yeah, that Imperial family isn't the greatest people in the world, but to see the terror on their faces and see the terrorism that the rebels kind of have to cause, it was a very interesting light to show. I know that the rebels are ultimately the good guys, but in this scene, it looked as if they were the bad guys, and that was really powerful that this show was able to make me see that. That was really cool. Then we have the prison episodes, and seeing the clean crispness of the prison compared to the rough grittiness of the outside world was very fascinating, but also the labor they were working on, very interesting. I've worked in a factory myself, so seeing that kind of play in, very fascinating. I sympathize with Andor very much. Seeing the prison escape, super fun, worked really, really well. Now, I want to talk about the finale. I love Rick's Road. This show ended so well. Number one, all the various plot lines that we've been following came together in one. Deidre, Cyril, Cassian, Luthen were all at Rick's Road. They were there because it culminated, and it was great. Notice that Mon Mothma wasn't there, but what else? I love how Marva gives this speech and empowers her people to take a stand, to rebel. And they start a mob. It's great, except that the mob don't have weapons. They don't have armor. They don't have anything, and they can't beat the Empire. The Empire has that superior technology advantage, and the mob doesn't work. But they do rebel, and it's awesome. And at the end, when Andor finds Luthen and is like, hey, I know you were here to kill me, but you either can kill me or I can join you. And it's fantastic. He's finally ready to accept and become a rebel. And even Luthen might even be ready to change his ways based on the speech of Marva's. And it's great. Finally, I want to talk about setting, and I love the setting. It is the Star Wars setting, which is very similar to us and familiar, but they added so much to it. I love Ferrix with this rich culture and community. The idea behind your ashes going into this brick and Rick's Road and all of that, that was super fun to see. Then you have Aldani and the meteor shower and the culture that used to be there, the original people there. Then you have the prison, which was believable. It had a water main. It had an incentive system for the prisoners. It had on program, and it just made sense. You have Luthen and his cool spaceship with all these cool weapons and stuff. His shop, which has more Easter eggs than I can even count. I loved seeing it. It was a fun world that we got to see. So, in conclusion, this was a very well written show with complex and interesting characters and a fascinating plot and a really good setting. So, it pretty much hit all my boxes that I wanted. The one thing that I don't like about it is it's very dark and very gritty. It's a little too intense for me to feel comfortable showing my kids, and therefore a little too intense for me to fully enjoy. I like it, I don't love it. I did really enjoy Andor, but it's not my favorite. I think my favorite Star Wars TV show will still have to be Star Wars The Clone Wars, but we'll talk about that another time.